we learn more about Beethoven through his letters, and that's, on the personal life. So I would like you to look at this. This is Beethoven's handwritten letter that he writes to a friend, Tobias Haslik. He shares with him a fun dream. I dreamed that I was in India and then in Syria. I even ended up in Jerusalem, and all of a sudden I started to look at the Bible. But he makes fun of his friend and said, and you know what? When I was just about to get deeper into the Bible, I thought of you, Tobias. If you see this, the words, "Oh, Tobias," here in the music. So this is a quote that Beethoven just wrote in a letter. And he never did any use of that, of this musical theme, until recently, composer, friend, Milch-Sheriff, actually was inspired by this dream of kind of internal wandering around the world and decided to write a piece, text by poet Joshua Sobol, and it's called The Eternal Stranger. Now, Milch-Sheriff writes in a very modern way, but she uses this quote that Beethoven started as a joke to his friend. So this is a very unique piece. It's a monodrama for an actor and an orchestra. And this is another great opportunity for us to collaborate with our friends at Ensemble Threatre and to have Jonathan Fox to put a new stage production to this music. And he's with us this afternoon.
So at Ensemble, we were producing the play Amadeus, and I thought we should somehow maybe get connected with the symphony and do something around Amadeus. I didn't know Nir at the time. Someone set up the meeting. I have to say I was actually quite nervous about it because he's got this aura about him. And no one calls me Maestro. And we had 30 musicians on our stage. We had our actors in costume doing scenes from the play on the sides. And we gave one line of dialogue to Nir, and he killed. I mean, the place just erupted in laugh, like in Casablanca. That was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
I want to ask you, because in this particular thing, like the one we did, the Soldier Tale with Christopher Lloyd, which was a beautiful production, in many ways the composer dictate the show, and you have an actor, yes, but it has to be perfectly timed with the music. Is it challenging? Is it fun?
With actors in musicals, it's actually not that difficult because they're singing it. What we did with Soldier's Tale, they had to speak the text on certain notes and certain beats. And so that was a challenge for me as a director because, I had to rely on my piano lessons from when I was 8 years old to look at the score and try to parse it out with the text. And really, if an actor has that in their bones, they get it. And if they don't, it can be challenging.
And this, in a way, is very similar to the Soldier Tale because the composer writes the narration, the text goes on musical accent. So it's not free. It has to be really timed. So I hope you cast somebody that would take a cue from a conductor, right?
Yeah. I'll try this time. But it's even more difficult, I think, because it's a poem. With Soldier's Tale, it was lines of dialogue. The actors are used to that, the added element of trying to do it to a score. But with this, it's a poem. I have never directed a poem before. I've directed things that were poetic, but not, yeah.
Well, it was done a few times now in Europe, at the Dresden Opera, in Palermo, at the Opera House.
Der Herren des Landes, Herren des Landes, Herren des Landes. Ich liebe und liebe.
And I know it actually will be together with our performance will be with the Boston Symphony, but they do a concert version. They didn't trust a theater production. But when we do something, and we want to do it the right way, that's the composer wanted it to be as a production. So
I see it as a challenge to try to figure out how we kind of bring this poem to life, which is a really beautiful poem. Joshua Sobel, by the way, is a really playwright. I knew him as a playwright. A play called Ghetto, which is, I think, a really haunting, major work that never gets done because it's a cast of 20. For this one, there's so many questions to answer between now and April.
He's so good in being on time, but it's just the process starts a little bit later with actors, right?
Often there's a lot of work I'm doing behind the scenes.
The music, we know the music, but you put your touch and it's such a magic happens. So, and then maybe last thing about the theme, the eternal stranger. I mean, you know, this touches something that when Beethoven started this as a joke almost. I mean, the poem is more about an impression of somebody that is an immigrant or a refugee, and there's so much of that in the word.
I'm a first-generation American, so my mother and grandparents were refugees. That would be kind of the first approach to looking at this particular poem about a man who is in a strange land. In fact, the poem starts with something like the sea kicked me out into this strange land, right? So, which has an echo of Shakespeare in it, you know, in Twelfth Night, what country friends is this? But, you know, in reading
Milch-Sheriff,
so I read a little bit of what she wrote about the poem too, which is fascinating because Beethoven, who was going deaf, was losing his hearing, was a stranger in his own land. And I think a lot of us feel sometimes like that too. And the poem started to make more sense to me when I started to think of it in terms of that way of being a stranger, not necessarily an immigrant, but maybe a stranger feeling disassociated from the society around you.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. We're so looking forward to this.